Have you ever felt that the only way to get more from somebody was to chase them or try harder? Yet, no matter what you do, it never seems to work out. Well, I lived this frustrating cycle for years, making me feel like I wasn't good enough for love. But then I discovered I had had it all wrong. And when I changed one critical thing, I was able to break out of that cycle, and I found myself in a relationship where I was valued and loved without having to chase anyone. So in this video, I'm going to reveal the critical mistake people make when they want more from somebody, how chasing is making it worse, and I'll show you exactly what you can do to finally break out of the cycle too. But before we get into what this game-changing technique is, we first have to understand the critical mistake that ends up putting us in more pain. And for that, we need to go back to 2013, where I learned this the hard way. I was in a relationship with somebody I was over the moon about. She was beautiful, fun, and I was basically obsessed with her. We had just gotten back home after celebrating our 1-year anniversary. I was on cloud 9, and I was absolutely convinced that this was my happily ever after. And then, out of nowhere, she blindsided me. She told me she didn't want to see me or talk to me for an entire week. I was devastated, and panic immediately set in. That entire week, I spiraled. I couldn't stop thinking about her, trying to figure out what I had done wrong, wondering if she was going to leave me, and how in the world could I fix this? I poured all my energy into crafting sweet gifts to remind her of how good we were together. But by the end of the week, I was a shell of myself. Sleep deprived, anxious, and desperate for her decision. My entire happiness seemed to depend on what she would say. And this is the mistake so many people make. See, in that moment, I had my own needs too, but I completely ignored them. I prioritized her feelings at the cost of my own. Instead of focusing on supporting myself and comforting myself in such a hard time, I became consumed by my fear and chasing her to feel okay. The issue was I was trying to relieve my pain through her response, which created an entire other issue we'll talk about a little bit later. This only caused me more pain. The truth is I had abandoned myself. And when you abandon yourself like this, you lose touch with who you are. You become dependent on the other person to make you feel better, and you feel isolated from what you really need and powerless to do anything to change it, creating an absolute feeling of desperation. It feels like we need to chase the person who's creating this distance so we can get closer and relieve our pain. But what if this instinctive response is actually making the situation worse? There are two major ways that chasing ruins our ability to connect deeper with someone. The first way gives away all your power and keeps you stuck. And the second one is so confusing, I stayed stuck in the loop for years. Mastering both of these will save you years of pain and help you build deeper connections with others. Now, the first pattern I want to show you. So if you and I were in a store and a stranger started moving towards you like this, what would your reaction be? Well, you'd probably take a step back to maintain the space between you and them. And you may have actually backed away from the screen as I approached you because of this instinct. Because if it feels like somebody is invading our space, we naturally want to distance ourselves to maintain our own bubble of safety. Now, this is what happens when we panic and try to cling or chase the person we want more of. They feel like their space or energetic safety is getting invaded. So they need to get space from you to rebalance that sense of safety and move away. Here it is written out in a slightly different way. This is their bubble and this is yours. The more you start to invade it, they have a sense of boundary crossing. So rather than connecting with you, their instinct is to move away. When we chase, when we panic, we push on their sense of safety and they perceive danger, so they create more distance. The more we chase and put our sense of happiness with them and unintentionally push them further away. Now, we aren't bad or wrong, we're confused about the real source of our relief. Now, before I tell you what that is, we need to look at the second pattern because this is much more tricky. I'm gonna be using these glasses to show you. When I have these glasses on, I can see things clearly and respond accurately. But if I take this marker and start to mark on these glasses and also cover them with tape, when I put these glasses on, everything I see is distorted. I cannot possibly see anything clearly. Now, as I'm moving around, I might knock into things because my view is blurred. These glasses are our lens of perception, how we're able to see the world. The marker is trauma as well as the tape, varying degrees of trauma. Renowned addiction expert Gabor Mate describes trauma not as what happens outside of us, but the inner experience after an event. That's why some of these wounds are a little bit more faint and other ones are completely blocking that ability to see. The issue with trauma is that it fractures us from our authentic self, and that distorts who we can be, how we have to show up in the world to get our needs met. Now, we all have varying degrees of trauma. Unhealed trauma creates distortions of how we perceive the world. So, if you're dating somebody who has a wound and trauma from early childhood, of somebody being too close in their space, which we described earlier, maybe that was an overly demanding parent, maybe they had an abusive parent, a helicopter parent. That parent invaded their sense of safety. They got too close in one way or another. So the only way for the child to be safe is to leave, to move. This perceived invasion. So if you are dating a person who has this wound, as you get closer to them, that invasion wound for them will get triggered. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but simply by their unconscious wound. That's why this second pattern stayed hidden for years in my relationships. This person with the early on invasion wound associates being close as dangerous when they're triggered. So they will distance, they will ghost you, they will avoid you. Their closeness with you is bringing up unresolved trauma, and they're responding to the past when they weren't safe unless they got space. Now, if you're not aware of this, like I wasn't for years, when they start to go distant, it's going to trigger you in your own past experience and your fear that they are leaving, which is what happened in my early on story. So if you aren't aware of this, you will instinctively start to ask what's wrong. Try to do better for them. Try to give them more so you can close this gap. But all that's going to do is going to keep repeating this cycle of push, pull, push, pull. So as you can see, both ways of chasing only cause the other person to distance more. So what can you do to actually get closer to somebody and get what you need? Well, there are 3 parts to how I freed myself from chasing and living in constant anxiety. This is what I call the ABC method. Now, if you want to break out of your pattern faster and have direct support, there is a link below where you can work with me one-on-one. So the ABC method, this is what allowed me to finally attract a relationship that valued and appreciated me. So let's break it down. First, A is for awareness. Awareness of the story or fear that's coming up with a situation. B stands for breath. Deep, slow breaths to break free of your fight or flight automatic response. And C stands for choice. A new choice to take care of yourself, moving into your body and not your brain. So let's use the example that you're dating somebody and you're starting to have some feelings for them. Then, out of nowhere, they need space, or maybe worst, they don't even tell you. They just low-key ghost. So this is where the awareness comes into play. So right here we have an event, something happening in your life. In this situation, they're distancing. Now we have to become aware of the story you're telling. In this case, it could sound like, they must have lost interest. What did I do to cause them to leave? Why does everyone always leave? Now this situation is actually neutral. We don't know why they went distant. Maybe their family member is having a health emergency. Maybe they got a whole lot of workload that they haven't told you about. Or maybe they're struggling with some deeper issues that they haven't shared with you. You can see that we assume the reason for their distance is because they lost interest or we did something to cause them to leave. When we start to feel anxious at the fear of somebody leaving, and we assume their distance is because they don't want us or they aren't interested, That's actually our own self-rejection. The story as to why that's happening, that's what we have to become aware of. And I was totally blind to this for so many years, and it was preventing me from getting more in relationships. And let me say this one more time. When we assume that the reason for somebody's distance is their rejection of us, and we haven't talked to them and we haven't heard from them what is happening, the only person actually rejecting us for sure is ourselves. Now, learning to reorient to ourselves in these moments changes everything. Now, another sneaky way this can come up is if you start to compare yourselves to others, or are anxious or worried they'll leave and that you're not good enough. Becoming aware of the story and the meaning is critical. Awareness before you lose yourself in the spiral. Now, the next step is B, breath. When we start to hear this story, oh, okay, the story I'm telling myself is that they're leaving me because I did something wrong. We're not trying to reason on it. We're not trying to use logic. What we're doing is coming out of our brain into our body. Because right now, when you tell this story, it's going to ring the same alarms as the past. And you're going to respond by wanting to chase them. But when you come back into your body and just start to breathe, trying to break yourself out of a fight or flight, it changes everything. Now, what this looked like for me is I would repeat the story I was telling myself out loud, which can sound like, the story I'm telling myself is that they're going to leave me because I'm not good enough. This is me rejecting myself, and I'm learning to break this habit and take care of myself, which is the gateway to connection I'm really looking for. And you don't have to repeat that. You can simply hear the story in your head, come to your body, focusing on your breath, which is essentially like a fire extinguisher on a fire. The more you slow your breaths and take deep breaths, the more you can help your body break out of the fight or flight response it's used to. The fear is that you won't have what you need and that you aren't safe unless they call you, unless they text you. But reestablishing your sense of safety within yourself first breaks you out of this habit. Now, as you become aware of the story and you start to use your breath to regulate your body, this creates a fork in the road. The old choice will be repeating the panic, the overwhelm, the chasing, everything I did in the story I told you earlier. But the new choice is taking the new road that leads to new experiences. Now, the new choice can be a somatic exercise, such as bouncing, letting that energy flow through your body. It could be a somatic hug, trying to regulate and stay connected. It could be going for a walk, which is so powerful because when you're walking, there's a nerve in your eye that's scanning for danger so you don't fall, and it's doing this unconsciously. But what that does is it pulls energy from your amygdala, which is your fear scanner. As you regulate, you come back to your adult mind with this new choice, and it allows you to see clearly and ultimately make the best choice for yourself in those moments. The ABC method right here that I just described is what will help you reconnect with yourself, which is the gateway to finding the connection that you're looking for outside of you. But even when you know all this, it can still feel like you can't let go. So in this video right here, I'm going to show you one of the biggest secrets that will allow you to completely break free from feeling stuck chasing somebody who isn't interested. So check that out right here.